Ever looked at the feeder series calendar and felt overwhelmed by the sheer amount of racing to watch? You're not alone. Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. We've had a proper super week in terms of how much single-seater action there has been, the very situation I have created this channel for. I'll run you through all the key talking points from FRECA to F1 Academy, from the road to Indy to various F4 series, and from the pinnacle of motorsports down to European karting. Together with Italian F4, the start of FRECA at Misano was clearly the headline series this weekend, at least in terms of the feeders. And I have to say, I was rather pleased to see my predictions all being rather accurate so far. In case you missed those, they should pop up here somewhere. The biggest shock to the system was without a doubt the Freddie Slater crash in race 1 and the subsequent victory by Matteo De Palo. I said he'll comfortably lead Trident, but I definitely didn't expect a dominant win in the first race of the season. Will he be a part of the title fight? I still don't think so, but to be honest, with a performance like this across both of the races, who knows what could happen. Race 2 was of course finally the expected Evan Giltaire versus Freddie Slater duel, and Giltaire did come out on top in that one. All signs are very much pointing to another close battle between the two as expected. The inter-team battle I was keeping an eye on the most was in the RSGP camp, where Enzo Delini did get away with the most points, but Kean Nakamura has still answered my question from the predictions. I reckon he'll be a proper threat for that battle as well. It was just a bit unfortunate he did get caught up in the Slater incident after qualifying this well. Akshay Bora, by the way, also with horrible luck in race 2, in case you missed that. This trio will absolutely keep us entertained, I think. As with all the series, we'll talk more about the midfield as the season goes on, but I do have two quick shoutouts for Pedro Claro and Nanda Woodbury. Claro had a great run with the exact kind of consistency, the lack of which was holding him back a bit last year. Van Amersfoort Racing might not necessarily have a title-worthy car, but if he can keep this up, all of you who had him down as a top 5 might very well be correct come the end of the season. As far as Bjorn Bakti is concerned, I'm really just super happy to see that my prediction was indeed correct. He might not have a chance against De Palo, but now that he has a car to work with, he very much is a threat for points and already brought home his first solid result. Very happy for the guy. F1 Academy was unfortunately cut in half by rain, so with only a reverse grid race to talk about, this will be short and sweet. A proper champion's drive by Doriane with a quick charge from P6 to the lead to put herself only 1 point away from her former teammate Maya Weug. Watching those two fight it out for the title might be great to see, but we can't forget that Campos still looks like the quickest team on paper, at least in the hands of Chloe Chambers and Alisha Palmowski. I'd still expect them to claw that gap back down. I do have to get my Emma Felbermeyer fanboy moment in, of course. Felbermeyer is getting better and better at her designated job as a cork in the bottle during the reverse grid, even if she did eventually get damaged enough to fall out of the points entirely. Ella Lloyd didn't have any better luck either. Instead, Aurelia Nobels and Leah Block finally had a pair of decent runs for the otherwise really struggling ART outfit. I still don't know what to make of Block in particular, as she has gone from a super exciting rookie to a somewhat anonymous sophomore, although I do suspect the team plays a part in that as well. Of course, we've also had an F1 round at Miami with more McLaren dominance, Ferrari radio drama and shit luck for Jack Doohan, so business as usual really. The only story I want to address this week is my boy Kimi Antonelli. Let's be real, what else could it be? Putting it on pole as far and away the youngest driver ever to do so. Sure, only in the sprint quali, and he had some proper poor luck in both the sprint and the race, but a remarkable achievement nevertheless. I definitely think we'll see him fighting and beating Russell in both quali and race on a regular basis going forward, especially considering we're now heading to the much more familiar European tracks. And since it has been a bit of a talking point online, I just want to say I do consider a sprint pole in the current format as just as valuable as a Grand Prix pole. Sure, it does need to be treated differently in the record books, but to be honest, I'm not a big statistics fetishist compared to the average racing fan, as you may have noticed from the lack of statistics in my videos. But since this is a controversial topic, feel free to tell us down in the comments how highly you rate a sprint pole for young Kimi Antonelli. Before we get to all the F4 action, there was more professional racing as Formula E has almost reached the halfway point of its season with its Monaco doubleheader, so I figured this is the perfect time to have a quick look at the championship battle. At this point, Oliver Rowland really looks like an overwhelming favourite, consistently front-running no matter the circumstances. Race 2 here was a perfect example. He didn't play it perfectly by any means, but still found himself as a comfortable P2 at the end. What more can you ask for? And his main rivals have all had considerable off weeks already. Porsche, McLaren and Mahindra all lacked the consistency of Rowland and Nissan, taking crucial points of each other while taking turns as the main rivals. Am I still hoping for Porsche or Taylor Barnard to fight back? Absolutely, but it is getting increasingly difficult to see that happening in my opinion. In the same vein, I do have to ask, what the fuck is going on with Jaguar? From consistent title contenders to absolutely nowhere over a single winter break is quite heartbreaking to witness. Nick Cassidy may have finally taken his first podium of the year, but to be honest that felt more like the equalizing powers of the wet weather than the sign of potential Jaguar comeback. Mitch Evans serving as all the evidence we need here really. To end on a more positive note, shout out to Sebastian Buemi for a dominant win in the wet. Not only a great drive individually, but finally a bright spot for Envision Racing. The squad has gone the same trajectory Jaguar is on now, only they started their downfall right after winning the team's title in 2023. Again, I wouldn't hold my breath for a full-on comeback of the team, but maybe I'd hope to see both Buemi and Frines fighting for points more consistently again. Both drivers are way too good to be down at the back of the pack. To kick off our lengthy Formula 4 segment, what better series to talk about than the return of Italian F4, the pinnacle of Formula 4 racing in many ways. And so far, the title fight looks rather familiar, with Prema dominating the karting-esque weekend in the hands of Kean Nakamura-Berta. I did expect the Alpine Junior to be one of, if not the favourite for the series, but that was a proper statement drive nonetheless, looking much more refined than last season and really here to win. Although this is really the same look he presented over the winter, even with in worse equipment. His Prema teammates did a good job all around, underlining the inherent strength of the squad. Sebastian Weldon came in hot with a win and a P2 for his first weekend on European soil, but I have to say Salim Manar continues to steal the show in my book. Going into the Winter Series, I would have expected Alexander Bondarev to somewhat comfortably be the better of the two, the way the dynamic has played out during their karting days. Instead, Hannah seems to have both better raw pace and, crucially, better adjusted his racecraft to cars despite having less official seat time. Definitely the big favourite for the rookie title so far. Unfortunately, my personal favourite, Thomas Streltsamanis, was good but not great. Certainly didn't look like a title contender here. Let's have a quick look at the other contender teams. Us Racing, Van Amersfoort and, new on the list, RSGP and their respective ace drivers. Max Popov absolutely carried Van Amersfoort Racing and by some metrics looked like the second best or even best driver on track. Although his shown skill might be a bit inflated by a sheer lack of experienced teammates to go up against. And not the greatest roster of teammates all around, truth be told. Us Racing might be the most intense inter-team battle on our hands, with Gabriel Gomez, Maxim Rehm and Kabir Anarak all firm contenders for multiple podiums or better this season. And even an outside shot for Lucas Amalisto. I still don't quite know what to make of the guy. Rehm unfortunately shit the bed a little after a costly jumpstart penalty in the first race and never found himself in such a position again, turning it into a case of Gomez versus Anarak. Gomez did get into an incident during the last race, but overall he and Anarak looked rather closely matched all around, and I could see both of them in the title hunt, if the Premier dominance allows of course. RSGP was a little sad to watch, as I had hoped for a continuation of Emanuele Oliveri versus Alex Powell. Instead, Powell looked a bit mediocre compared to his impressive Italian teammate, but maybe I'm just a tad salty that we don't get K&B versus Powell in the same machinery anymore. The positions outside the points are also massively interesting in Italian F4, particularly from the likes of Genza and PHM, but once again, we'll save that for a later date. Spanish F4 had its second round and we had a rather familiar look at the front with MPA's Reinier Lammers versus the Campos pair of Thomas Strauven and Jan Przowski really dictating the weekend all around, at least in terms of pace. Lammers continues the trend of getting wins taken away from him post-race, despite technically completing a hat-trick on the road. Either way, he still looks like the brilliant kid I remember from karting that very much went missing last season. As far as the Campos duel is concerned, I have to say Straubing impressed me ever so slightly more than Przewski. Both are clearly brilliant in terms of raw speed, but the Pole did struggle to charge his way through the field the same way Straubing managed in the final race. That really was a championship-worthy drive in my book. Reno Franco, Hudson Schwartz and Juan Cota were all pretty consistently in the upper midfield as well, to nobody's surprise. Clearly a bit of an MP weekend all around. On the flip side, Ian Eichmanns got rather unlucky but remained among the quickest rookies, while Niklas Schaufler was struggling a bit compared to the first round. As a certified fanboy of the latter, I have to admit that was a little disappointing for me personally, though absolutely nothing to worry about in the grand scheme of things. And two shoutouts to end this segment on: Andrej Petrovic and Nathan Tye, both for very different reasons. Petrovic for another stellar performance in race 3, really driving the wheels of his Technical machine and an all-around joy to watch. Meanwhile, Tye was about the most unlucky driver you can think of, caught up in incidents somewhat outside of his control twice in a row to ruin what could have been a rock-solid triple point scoring weekend. The only way from here is up. British F4 this time managed to broadcast 2 races, so we did get to watch James Pizique control the field at least once. The Australian F4 dominator is looking rather sharp here. Given his experience, this is of little surprise, but it is still nice to see. Since Leo Robinson remains a bit absent, he certainly appears to be the favourite among the returning drivers, even if Martin Molnar and August Reiber of course keep themselves in the mix as well. Although overall, I still believe in Fionn McLaughlin. I want to highlight that all 3 wins went to Rodin because Adam Al-Azhari put in the work required to take home the reverse grid win. His season has been a bit disappointing so far outside of that, but I do hope that win puts him back on track a little bit. I would have expected to see him closer to the top 5 of the championship, to be honest, but maybe that was just a little too much. And last but not least, I want to address Thomas Behrmann for a second. I have of course said in the past that I don't think he is quite on his brother's level, something I obviously still stand by, but some people have apparently taken this as me saying he's shit. In reality, he is performing about as well as I expected. Great work, but not exceptional. At this rate, it is only a matter of time until he finds a regular grid podium or even a win, but he won't be a part of the title fight, I don't think. Japanese F4 kicked off at Fuji, and while I don't want to give it too much time at this stage, the weekend produced some interesting results, so I do want to introduce you to the front of the grid at least. Toyota Junior Tokiya Suzuki finds himself leading the championship with an excellent display, but he was in fact not the fastest man on track. Those spots belonged firmly to the Kageyama duo of Itsuki Sato and Ryo Shirazaki, the latter looking like he could have dominated all 3 races. Unfortunately, he stalled it off the line in the first one and, at least as far as I could figure out with my lack of Japanese language skills, suffered some sort of mechanical issue while leading under safety car in the incredibly short final race. Either way, P5 in the standings does not reflect the kind of weekend he has had at all. Most returning drivers did about as expected, with Tosei Moriyama and Kiyoshi Umegaki doing well for themselves. Moriyama especially was part of the lead group in all races. Kotaro Shimbara, on the other hand, had a little bit of an off weekend after being a title contender last season. His pace was evidently still there, but he suffered big time in quali and ran out of time to do much about it in all but one of the races. Certainly a guy I'd bet on for better results in the near future. There's quite a few more noteworthy names here. Japanese F4 is incredibly competitive top to bottom given how big the grid is, but we'll get to that in a less busy episode. I just recommend giving the series a chance if you haven't yet. I find it is produced to an incredibly high standard and the racing is certainly always action-packed, if not too chaotic at times. We'll skip some of the other, lesser F4 series for now, but we will get back to them at a later date, especially the Brazilian F4, as that one is actually good to watch. Instead, let's have a quick look at the US. The USF Juniors returned for round 2 in mixed conditions around Barber with a dry Friday, complemented by a wet Saturday. Zanella Racing was the team to beat, with Leonardo Escorpioni once again the fastest guy on track, although he did eventually get beaten by his 14-year-old teammate Ty Fisher in the wet. Fisher himself really had a mega weekend all around, Him and Oliver Rowland are firmly the two most interesting guys to watch on that grid in my opinion, even if VRD looked a little outgunned, making life a bit difficult for Rowland. Since I've not talked about him during the first round, I want to shout out Finnish driver Vilho Attola, firmly in the mix for the best of the rest positions this weekend and even beating Rowland and Fischer to P2 in one of the races. He may be 2 years older than his 14-year-old rivals, but is still very much a rookie, so either way, I reckon he'll be one to watch as well. In IndyNXT, we had more of the expected Dennis Hauger domination. This time, his anticipated rival Kaya Colette just disappeared halfway through the race during a damn ad break. If you caught what happened there, please feel free to let me know down in the comments. And since we have talked about the sharp end of the series already, we can focus on two incredible 17-year-old rookies instead. Although, as it turned out, one of them found himself at the sharp end as well. Evagoros Papasavas did inherit P2 from Colette and did an excellent job defending the position against Lockie Hughes and Miles Rowe until the checkered flag. The youngster has made the big step up from USF 2000 straight to IndyNXT this year. This was his debut drive and to be honest it couldn't have gone any better. After falling just short of greatness in the USF 2000s, this is certainly quite the shocking result. In similar fashion, Max Taylor impressed considerably with his first of the season here as well. Unlike Papasavas, he was not defending at the front, but rather charging from the back, pulling off overtakes left, right and centre to take a solid P7. He absolutely remains a driver to watch, both here and in the USF Pro 2000s. In IndyCar proper, there really is only one story I want to talk about. And no, it won't be the usual Alex Palou glazing show we like to do on here. The McLaren trio is putting on an excellent inter-team battle this season, with Christian Lundgaard really rising to the occasion, not just taking the fight to Pato O'Ward, but at this point beating him with some solid consistency, at least as much as we can say that after only 4 races. This was a sick drive to claim P2 and really makes you wonder a little bit how many opportunities Pato O'Ward left on the table these last couple of seasons. And of course, we can't forget about young Nolan Siegel either. I still stand by the fact that he is in fact a talented driver, despite the bags of money getting him a seat early. And he is showing it more and more regularly. Finally, with a solid top 10 finish, even if he did lose out to O'Ward in the end. And most importantly, his qualifying is consistently solid at this stage, and will surely only improve from here. Any of you changed their mind about Siegel yet? And of course, we can't leave this segment without a quick shout out for Rinus VK, after it looked like he might be out of a seat altogether, dragging his Ed Carpenter racing machine into the podium battle ahead of the likes of Will Power and, once again screwed by a pit stop, Colton Herta certainly deserves some recognition. Then again, I thought he was always criminally underrated to begin with, so there is that. Either way, enough of the Formula Racing for today, but of course we can't leave without our quick weekly karting report. At the European Karting Championship, the title battle in OK Junior remains a Prema/Kart Republic show, with Noah Baglin and Dean Hoogendoorn clearly the two favourites at this point. Hoogendoorn very much made up for his off weekend last time with a pretty comfortable win, while Baglin managed to hang on to P2, although aided by some last lap carnage. The final is definitely a race to watch for anyone not actively into karting yet. Since I assume you guys are slowly getting familiar with all the favourites, I want to highlight a couple new names today. Mainly Endo Arata, or is it Arata Endo? The broadcast doesn't seem to be sure either. Either way, the Japanese kid has been hinting at strong results a fair bit this year, and here he looked all set for a podium until crashing with Will Green on the last lap. Either way, a strong run across the weekend and the result will surely follow at some point. And because we've never talked about him either, Lucas Els has really turned into a consistent threat as well, taking turns as the lead driver for Victory Lane with Luke Thal. He may have dropped off a bit late in the race, much like Dan Alleman, who keeps showing pace with no big results to speak of, but Els did shine massively in the opening stretch of the race. The first lap in particular was rather memorable. You really gotta love how wide open the OK Seniors are as a class this season. Christian Costoya, dominator of the first Champions of the Future round, managed to strike back here, controlling the weekend to put himself in the championship lead ahead of struggling James Anagnostiaitis and Thibaut Ramaekers. Dries van Langendonk also had a solid drive in the final to salvage what was otherwise a bit of a forgettable weekend in the wet conditions. He apparently seems to prefer the dry conditions. Again, I assume you know most of the big names by now. If not, feel free to watch some of my older karting reports. So instead, I want to highlight people we have not yet talked about much. First, Daniel Calera for his remarkable consistency, not just here, but this year overall. I've always known him to be a lock for the finals, but this year he has really found an extra gear to consistently put himself in top 5 contention. And second, Lewis Burrell, European Junior Champ in 2023 and a key rival to former teammate Dries van Langendonk, but who has so far had a rough time in the seniors. This weekend, he put in one of the most epic charges I've ever seen in a superheat to go from P28 to P3. Most of these positions in one single lap. He also doubled up with another charging drive in the final to finally take some decent points. All around, very happy to see that. And third, Lev Krutulov for a stellar weekend all around in the usually outgunned Energy Course Factory team. We have talked about his breakout drive in the juniors at some point, and he very much looked like the same driver here, until it all went wrong at the start of the final. Definitely turning into a bit of a personal favorite of mine, but then again I am also an Energy Course fan, so there is that. On the flip side, last year's dominator and Kart Republic ace Joe Turney is having a really rough time with things in this year's Europeans. After no points in the first round, he looked back in form here, only to spin himself into a DNF during the final, really a bit of an uncharacteristic mistake. It remained unclear if any mechanical issues were at play, but either way, this is it for the dream of back-to-back titles, certainly a huge disappointment. There was also the new FIA Academy Seniors Trophy, or whatever the exact name is, but this episode has been going on long enough and I want to see a bit more from that series before we do a deep dive on that, so we'll leave it for a later date as well. This means it would now be a great time to drop all of your thoughts, predictions and questions down in the comments. I always love our discussion, gives me a chance to talk about even more drivers. And otherwise, I thank you all for watching and I do hope to catch you in the next one.